Hello and welcome to Transplant's Take on Sport. My name's Lewis Daniels and my guest today is kidney transplant recipient and Lucky Stars Australia transplant cricketer Ashley Butcher. Ashley chats to me about his experience of going through kidney failure and a heart attack, as well as his cricketing highlights for the Australian transplant team. I think you'll be able to take something from the determination Ashley has shown to overcome setback after setback and come through the other side to pull on the Baggy Green Cap for Australia. If you're enjoying the podcast, please make sure you press subscribe or follow wherever you normally listen so you don't miss an episode. And if you'd like to follow the podcast on social media, all the links will be in the show notes. Ashley Butcher, welcome to Transplant's Take on Sport.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
You've been mentioned previously before on the podcast by Scott Fairbrass, who you've played with when he was in Australia, and he stayed with you for a little while. So regular listeners may have heard a bit about you before and a bit about how your transplant came about. But would you be able to let us all know when it was that you first found out that you had kidney problems?
Yeah, sure. So I guess I kind of started feeling unwell. Just felt really run down, probably for about 6 to 8 months before I actually got diagnosed. And I'd never been sick a day in my life and never caught a cold. Being a typical Australian male, I've never been to the doctor unless anything was broken. And I just got to the point where I was run down. I was run down so much. I'd get home from work and I'd literally, all I could do was fall asleep. I was losing weight hand over fist. And I was actually, it was during school holidays and I was off with my daughter at the time. And I thought, look, something's just not right. And I actually stopped in and got a blood test. Didn't think anything more of it. A couple of days later, the doctor's surgery called and asked me to come. I was at work at the time. They asked me to come after work to get my results. So this is about 10 o'clock in the morning. I said, so I organised something for about 6:30 at night. I got a phone call back about 10 minutes later from the doctor himself. Said, no, you need to get here and get here now. So I went in, and sort of from that minute onwards, I got put into the emergency department in the hospital, and my world came caving in from that day. So I was diagnosed with complete renal failure. Apparently, I was told if I had left it a couple of weeks, it would have been game over. So I had an emergency procedure that afternoon to put, I can't even remember the name of it, where they put it into your heart. It goes directly into your heart so you can dialyse directly. I was on the dialysis machine, the hemodialysis, at 9 o'clock the next morning for my first dialysis. So this happened as an absolute headspin. I just absolutely couldn't believe what was going on. Literally the day before, I was at work and things were going along as normal. So it was absolutely just absolute whirlwind. That afternoon, I had my first treatment of dialysis, went for 2 hours, and it was apparently it was a very soft dose. And I had my wife and my daughter in with me at the hospital. We went to the canteen to play a game of Uno, a game of cards with my daughter, and I felt like a ton of bricks fell on my chest. I thought something's not right here, so I sort of got up and said to the wife, I need to go back to the bedroom. And I think my daughter at the time was 7 or 8, so I didn't want to show her that I wasn't right in front of her. So we sort of trudged my way back to the ward and got to the end of the ward. And I said to the wife, no, don't come in. And I sort of got around the corner out of view of my daughter, and I collapsed onto the bed, and it was just absolutely, I couldn't breathe. It was horrendous. I didn't know what the hell was going on. Absolutely, I was petrified. It was like watching an episode of ER or something like that. There was people all around me. It was just crazy weird. It hurt, but it wasn't super painful. And all I kept asking for, I just remember I was asking for, all I need is a Panadol and it'll go away. So Panadol's a painkiller. I'm not sure if you guys know what Panadol is, but it's just basically it's a paracetamol.
Oh yeah, I've heard of it.
And yeah, so this lasted for about 5 minutes, and then literally that minute it just stopped. I felt fine, no worries at all. And I thought, oh well, that was really weird. And they came to me the next morning and said, look, we're just going to send you through to, I think it's a EKG you get on your heart just to make sure everything's fine. nothing went wrong. So no problem at all. They said, look, there's nothing to worry about. There's no way you've had a heart attack. Went in, had the EKG, was talking to the lady who was doing it at the time. And I sort of trying to get some hints out of her. What's going on? She's going, look, I can't see anything. I've been doing this 25 years and you're fine. There's nothing to it. Well, that's fabulous news. That afternoon, I was back on dialysis, sitting in the chair, and my doctor came up to me and said, yeah, you actually did have a heart attack. So we're going to need to rush you into surgery again and put some stents into your heart. And I said, this is all happening 36 hours previously. I'd been up and about and just living my life. So that evening, I went in to get some stents put into my heart, which I didn't know at the time. But they do that when you're awake. They go in through through a vein through your groin, and so you're awake the whole time. And I was talking to the guy, and he sort of went in and didn't feel anything at all, and he's dicking around for a couple of minutes, and he's kind of said, "No, well, we can't do it. You're shot. You need a bypass." As I said, my world just continued to just absolutely implode. I just couldn't believe what was going on. So yeah, then I had to get heart doctors involved, and it turned out I needed a quadruple bypass. But they couldn't give me one of those because I was that sick. I needed to go home, get well enough to give myself any chance of making it through that operation. So I was on dialysis every other day for about 3 months leading up to my operation. I was told pretty bluntly by my surgeon that there was about a 90% chance I wasn't going to make it through.
Wow.
And about a 95% chance that if I did make it through, I would stroke out on the table. So I kept saying the right things to my family, as you do.
Yeah.
We'll be right, we'll get through it. But it was really weird. Mentally, I remember it as if it was yesterday. I went into the hospital for a 6 a.m. Monday morning operation, and got there at about 4 o'clock on the Sunday afternoon. I'd said my goodbyes to my daughter, and my wife drove me in, and I stopped at the door as we were walking in, and it was serene. I turned around, I looked outside, and it was a beautiful sunny day, and nice setting of trees, and I sort of looked outside, and I thought, well, that's the last time I'll see that. So mentally, as I said, to my family and all my friends and everyone who was being positive, I was saying all the right things. But if I'm being 100% honest, I gave it away that afternoon. I thought, I'm just in a world of trouble here.
Yeah.
So yeah, I went in, and I had, I think, probably the best night's sleep I've ever had in my life. I woke up, I was relaxed, I was joking with the doctors as they were shaving me down. It was weird, and I remember sort of that Sunday afternoon in the Australian rules football, my side was playing the doctor's side, and we joked about it the day before. My side won, and we had a $50 bet, and I'm just about to go under the knife and be knocked out. And I remember distinctly the last thing I said to him was, "Don't forget you owe me $50, and if I don't make it, you owe it to my wife." And that was that. And the sort of next thing I remember was waking up about a week later in intensive care, and just, yeah, as I said, I'd mentally given it away. But I got lucky. Yeah, I got more than lucky. I had one of the best surgeons in Australia. I owe my life to him. And then sort of recovering from there, my next goal was to get healthy enough to get on the transplant list. So, and I was off work obviously all this time. So I got healthy enough to move from hemodialysis to peritoneal dialysis, which gave me the ability to do at home. And this sort of after 3 or 4 months, I got well enough to actually go back to work, which is good. Work were really accommodating and really looked after me well. I sort of went back part-time to start with, and then full-time, and sort of juggling full-time work with having to dialyse 3 times a day was difficult, but we sort of worked our way around it. And I got the phone call on the morning of the 23rd of April 2015. Was about 6:45 in the morning, and I was on my way to work. Actually, I just pulled up to the car park at work, and that time of day, I don't do mornings well. I never have. So I was, honestly, if I'm being honest, I was still 3/4 asleep, even though I was about a half an hour drive from my house to work. I got a phone call, and I sort of was only half listening. It was actually as I was opening the door and turning off the alarm to where I was working, and it was Dr. Manaham. The phone, the voice on the other end of the phone said it was Dr. Manaham from the Alfred Hospital, and what are you doing right now? And I'm like, I'm just opening up at work, and not because I'd only been on the transplant list for 2.5, 3 months. So, and I was told, I was told I'm going to be waiting 3 or 4 years. And then he said, well, best you get over here. We've got a kidney for you. And that, I sort of woke up right then. I thought, well, hang on, that can't be right. And I thought it was one of my mates from the cricket club just giving me a little bit of, trying to wind me up. And I'm like, look, whoever this is, there's a time to have fun and games, and I'm big on practical jokes, but there's some things you don't mess with, and this isn't right. And I probably said a few words I shouldn't, because I thought it was one of the boys and having some fun with me. And Dr. Manahan interrupted me very quickly and said, Ashley, you're actually on speakerphone in the boardroom with the transplant team, the selection team. And again, this is not a joke, this is real. And he asked, how was I feeling? And it was funny, I'd woken up with a cold that day, so I had a stuffed head and I was a bit nasally, and I thought, well, this is actually real. I'm not telling this. So I just lied through my teeth. I'm feeling fantastic. I'm up and about. And he's like, well, how long do you get here? And I sort of thought, well, I was about an hour away from the hospital, but I sort of thought, for this opportunity, I'm going to drive through every red light, break every speed limit to me. And I said, I'll be there in 20 minutes. And he said, no, it's all right. It's, the kidney was coming from interstate. So I had a couple of hours. So I then, it sunk in, and I was standing there. I absolutely froze. I just didn't know what to do at the end of the phone call. And one of my guys who worked with me came in about 15 minutes later. I was just standing there in the showroom at work. The alarm was going off. I hadn't turned it off. I didn't even hear it. I couldn't think. And he came in all worried, what's going on? I told him, and he's like, what are you doing here? Leave. And so I went to go. He's going, where are you going? I said, I'm going straight to the hospital. He goes, well, no, have you called your wife? You've got time. So I sort of got in the car. I thought, right, I'll go home, because I still had a peritoneal bag in me that I had to drain out. So I thought, I'll go home, drain that out. I called the wife on the way home, who was just about to take the daughter off to school, and I sort of told her the news, and she was as stunned as I was. And her first reaction was, well, you can't. I go, what do you mean you can't? She goes, well, we haven't decided. We haven't discussed what's going to happen. How are we going to handle it as you go in hospital? And I sort of said, with all due respect, love, I don't give a I'm going to be in the hospital an hour and a half, and I'll wake up in a week, and the world will be different. So we sort of got home, and gave my daughter a kiss, and she went off to school, and the wife and I trudged into the hospital, and we got there and sat down and waited, and the doctor sort of came around the corner about an hour later, and with a fairly grim look on his face. And I'd heard about people being let down for whatever reason and false alarms. And he's come into the room. He's going, look, I'm really sorry. I've got some really bad news for you. And my heart broke. I just couldn't believe it. He's gone, yeah, the helicopter's been delayed 2 hours. Gone, that's it. I have to wait another 2 hours. So this is still on. So yeah, and then so I wanted to punch him in the head. I was so up, then so down, and then so up again. My emotions were fairly all over the place. So, so we're sitting there for another couple of hours, and we're chatting away. We're reading the paper, playing some cards or what have you. And then sort of a nurse came up and said, we better give you a chest X-ray, just to make sure you're all clear. And as I said, I had a cough and a hell of a head cold that I've been doing my very best to hide my sniffles and my sneezes and what have you. And I thought, God, this is going to show that I'm not feeling 100% well. So I got really nervous then. So I went down to went down a couple of floors into the X-ray room, and it was as I said, it was a chest X-ray machine. And they sort of, for whatever reason, they wanted me to hug it so they could get a better X-ray of my chest. So I was hugging it, and they were just, and as I said, I was sweating bullets. I was that nervous that they were just about to take the shot. And then I sort of look over my right shoulder, and about 20 people come barging into the room, running to me. It's here. And they've got people tearing my clothes off me. somebody else jabbing stuff into my arm just to get me ready to go under, and it was man, it was mayhem. And they're like, we've got to go, time. And I thought, well, at least now they won't catch me out that I'm not feeling well. So that was, I guess that was a win. I'm like, well, can I at least say goodbye to the wife? And they're like, no, there's no time for it. So got slapped onto the bed and wheeled up, and luckily they got my wife and met me as I was entering the theatre, and it's just, my adrenaline was pumping 100 miles an hour, and they're like, I get into the room and there's people screaming at the anaesthetologist, get him under, get him to sleep, we've got to go now, and he's going, right, he's got all the lines. Whenever you start counting backwards from 10, so I've been through 1,000 or 2,000 operations along the way, so you sort of, I remember always getting to 7 and that's it, and so I start off 10, 9, 8, 7. Before I know it, I'm at 1, and I'm as bright as a button. I couldn't believe it. And they're like, what's going on? Why isn't he under? And he's like, he won't go. His adrenaline's too high. And the anaesthetist come to me and said, mate, you've got to calm down. We can't knock you out. And I said to him with a little colourful language that I won't use in respect to your podcast, Lewis, but I said, mate, I don't care if you have to hit me over the head with a frying pan. Knock me the hell out. I need to get to sleep now. So anyway, eventually that happened. And again, same thing, sort of 2 days later, I woke up in intensive care, and I had a kidney that I was just been blessed with since day one. I have not had an issue. It woke up 2 hours after the operation. I was passing urine straight away, and it was it was hands down to this day still the greatest time of my life. It was just, and it changed me as a human. And it's I've been lucky ever since. I have not skipped a beat. It touch wood. It's the best thing to happen to me personally. It's just been an amazing trip.
It's such a special feeling to receive a kidney. I didn't want to break your flow with that. I wanted to just let you go through and tell your story. But the determination you've shown is unbelievable, because you've, from the start, when you first went into hospital, you've had blow after blow after blow, and then you've got through setback, and then eventually you get that kidney. How did you process everything that was happening? And in what you've said is such a short amount of time as well.
Not well, if I'm being honest. I just couldn't believe it. As you said, it was just blow after blow after blow. I just never got any good news early doors, and everything was getting worse. And psychologically, I struggled beyond belief. I did a really good job of keeping a happy face and a happy exterior, but internally I was struggling. I've always been a sort of a man's man that you take things on, you don't show your emotions, but I'd find myself in the dialysis chair just breaking into tears. It's just, it was as low as I've ever been. I started having some really, really dark thoughts about life and what life looked like moving forward, and if it was actually worth the fight. If I'm being honest, I wouldn't have. I got to a point where actually, and I couldn't believe it, that I actually made a conscious decision that I'd get to that point where I'd have to make a conscious decision about whether there was going to be a tomorrow. I was very uneducated at the time. I kind of thought people who sort of took that option were mentally weak. And I just couldn't believe it was me who was there in that position. I was sitting in my car one night after dialysis and actually consciously making that decision. And I thought, if it was just me, I think the decision may have, things may have panned out a little differently. But I always have and always will live for my daughter. That was my saving grace. That I didn't want to leave her without knowing that if I had to leave, I had to leave. But I wanted to give it as best a fight as I could along the way. So it was difficult. It was bloody hard. It was mentally hard. I had some wonderful support people, friends who I never. I've always had a lot of friends, but never been extremely close to people, with the exception of my family. But I had one friend, Cassandra, who just to this day is one of my closest friends. Helped me out mentally. Just she had some family experience in the transplant community, and she would come and spend time with me in dialysis, and that was, I can't thank her enough to this day. And I've told her to her face, I credit her with saving my life. And I also got some professional help from a lady at Dialysis, who was an absolute godsend. And again, I always thought people who needed that kind of help were mentally, weren't up to it. But having been down that path, my eyes are well and truly been opened, and that you can't get through these things by yourself. You've got to ask for help. You've just got to. So it was difficult, but as I said, towards the end of it, it was just good news after good news after good news, and since that day, everything's been onwards and upwards, mate. It's been an absolute pleasure.
How important has it been to talk to other people about it throughout, as you said, for the mental side, to keep your head up and keep going?
Yeah, early doors, I wouldn't speak to anyone about it, with the exception of my wife. And even still, I wouldn't speak to her about it. I would just, I've never been an emotional person, but I would break down in front of her, and I'd never ever done that ever. But I couldn't express what I was going through, and she was struggling as well, so I didn't want to put that on her any more than what I had to. But as the further I got into the journey, and so the dialysis nurses were really good in helping me talk anything through. As I said, I had some professional help from a lady, Joanne, who I'm still in touch with today, who was just an amazing human being. Cassandra, who I've spoken to many, many times and just lent on her from experience and what tomorrow looks like. I've been fortunate with some absolute top notch. You really, these kind of situations, you really find out who your friends are, rather who your absolute tight mates are, rather than just your friends and associates. And I've been really blessed that I know who I can count on when things are at their worst. I owe a lot of people a hell of a lot, and that's with the gift that I've been given. I try and pay that back every day, and try and live my best life. And that's the only way I can repay it. In all honesty, I don't know any other way.
I think you're spot on there. It's so important to talk, and then you do become a lot closer to people when you go through the hard times and you get through the other end, and everyone, you can see how happy other people are that you've come through and that you're still there, and you can enjoy the time you're spending together. When you mentioned dialysis there, we've talked about it before on the podcast, and we've talked through the different types, but for those who haven't listened to any others, would you be able to briefly explain the two types of dialysis?
Yeah, so I started off on hemodialysis, which is they basically keep churning your blood through a machine. They recycle your blood through and get out any liquid that you have, because you lose your ability to get rid of liquid. So it takes weight off you, and it cleans out all the bad stuff. That's not a great technical term, but it takes the crap out of your blood, so you actually feel better. That was, for me, I would do that. I think by the time I was finished, I was on a 4.5 hour cycle. So you sit there in a chair on a machine for 4.5 hours. I was lucky to get into the closest one to home, which was only 5-10 minutes down the road. So I got in the 6 o'clock to midnight shift. So that was really difficult when I was working. I sort of nicknamed it God's waiting room, because you don't live in that room. You just avoid dying, and everyone in that room avoids dying. There is no living. It's a hell of a depressing place. It really tests you out mentally if you're not armed. If you're not armed to actually fight, then that place will take you down. I did that for 6 or 7 months. So we had 15 chairs, and I think in my 6 or 7 months, we had 4 or 5 people who, for one reason or another, who passed on, whether it be through the disease getting them, or that they mentally couldn't get through it, and they decided to take matters into their own hands. So the day I went to peritoneal dialysis, where it's a fluid exchange 24 hours a day. That was the day I actually started living again. My fluid restrictions were off. You don't realise how hard it is when you're on hemodialysis. I think I was on 120 ml of fluid a day.
It's not a lot.
especially living in Australia in an Australian summer where it's 40, 45 degrees during a day, and you have to learn how to sip and make sure that's enough. So that was difficult. But being able to do being able to do peritoneal at home was an absolute godsend. Um, I was able to go on holidays again. We went on a holiday on a cruise ship, and the people who supplied all the chemicals, they got it all on the boat for me, and I felt 3/4 human again, and I was prepared to do that for as many years as it took. It was limiting, but compared to where I was under hemodialysis, it was the freedoms were just amazing. So to do that and to have the opportunity to do that, that was fantastic. Made my life a lot easier with work. I could sort of get back to trying as close to real with work as I could. So yeah, it was. It's. I think about it. Yeah, on those nights where you can't get to sleep and you look at the roof and you think, what happens if you get that phone call again and your kidney starts playing up and I have to go back? Could I go back to it mentally? Could I go back to it? You don't have a choice. Of course, you're going to go back to it, but
Yeah.
it's certainly nowhere I want to rush back to, mate, because it's bloody hard yards, mate. It's a hard life.
I feel very grateful that I managed to avoid that, because you hear stories. Some people absolutely love it, and the fact they can live their own life they live the life with it. Some people really do struggle on dialysis because of the restrictions that you might have. Again, I can't talk from experience, but I've listened to other people and their experiences with it.
Well, my dad who passed away about 18 months ago, he was on dialysis for about 15 to 20 years, and on hemo the whole time. And I I didn't I certainly didn't pay it enough credence until I actually had to walk a mile in my dad's shoes. And what he did for that, to be able to mentally be able to do it for that long, was nothing short of heroic. What he did for our family for hanging in for so long. Because I don't know that I've got that in me. I don't know that I could have done what my dad did. So yeah, he passed December of 19 after a long battle. But 20 years in dialysis was a bloody massive effort.
It's a long time.
Yeah, his disease his and mine were not related at all. Dad's was he had chronic kidney disease and he knew he was going to end up on dialysis for many, many, many years out. Where I got lucky enough to just catch a virus, and that's sort of that was the beginning of my story. So yeah, so it was. But anyway, yeah, dialysis isn't something I'd wish on my worst enemy. It's as I said, it's God's waiting room is what I call it. You're not living, you're just not dying. That's all you're doing.
Let's move on to your sport, and my sport as well, which is cricket.
Yes, mate.
When did you first start playing, and has it always been your main sport?
Yeah, it has. Yeah, I started playing. Goodness me, what am I? So 37 years ago, as a 8-year-old. Started following my dad around playing cricket, and just all I wanted to do was be dad, and play like dad. So I followed him everywhere, and I finally got old enough to play in under 12s. And I still remember my first game of under 12s. It was possibly up to that time the happiest day of my life, and I went out in under 12s, faced my first ball, it was the first game of the year, and I opened the batting. I faced the first ball, hit my first ball for 6. I thought, well, how easy is this game? And we played 14 games that year, and my season aggregate was 6. I made 13 ducks to follow after that 6. But I played that since I was 8 or 9 years old, and absolutely loved it. I played a lot of other sports around. I played volleyball and basketball and tennis, football, Australian rules football, and all different kinds of sport. But cricket was absolutely my live and die passion.
So what sort of standard were you playing at growing up and then into adulthood?
Never a very high standard. I'd like to say, it was as I think I got as much out of my absolutely limited amount of talent that I could. I certainly played a lot of junior representative cricket. I played a lot of in local leagues. I played first grade cricket for best part of 15 to 20 years over 3 separate clubs. But look, I was never more than just a good average cricketer. Despite if you had have asked me in my mid-20s when I was a little more full of myself and a little more brash, I would have told you that I'm very unlucky not to be playing Test cricket. But the reality is I was just a cricketer. My certainly my ambitions didn't quite weigh up to my own thoughts and my ability. Let's put it that way.
I mean, as long as you're enjoying it, I think that's the main thing, and
Exactly.
meeting people.
And that's the reason why up until this year I've just retired from cricket in the last 3 weeks, simply because I'm just not ready to give away my cricket mates. Yeah, it's been that hard. But I'm a broken down old man with no skill. That makes it very hard to get up every morning and go through the aches and pains and keep producing nothing and want to go and do it again. So, but no, cricket's my life. Absolutely love, as in sport, I absolutely love cricket and watching it and playing it. And doesn't matter what country it is or what it's on. If it's on the telly, I'll watch the Bangladeshi Premier League. It doesn't matter. I'm just bloody addicted to it, much to my wife's chagrin.
So you mentioned that you opened the batting on your first game. Have you always been an opening batsman?
No. So I've always been a lightning quick left arm opening bowler. Who I knew how to hold, the bat, but I was always been a lower order cricketer until I've got older, and I don't bowl anymore, mainly through the issues I've got through my kidney disease, and it just doesn't allow my body to do that anymore. So I've turned myself into an opening batsman, only because and a wily off spinner. But no, as in my prime, my cricket, I was a left arm opening bowler.
We've spoken about your transplant already. How close to your transplant were you able to play? I know that I got to I think it was about 8 days before I played, not to a great level. It was hard to run in and bowl and run to the boundary, but how close could you get?
So I just came off the back of a season. So our season finished in early March, and I played that whole season. And I went into hospital in late March. But it was I did a really good job looking back on it, hiding how sick I was.
Yeah.
So at training or during a game, I'd bowl. Say I'd open the bowling bowl 5 or 6 overs and tell the skipper I'd have to go off to go to the toilet, and I'd go into the toilet and literally collapse, and I couldn't breathe, and it was just it was. But I didn't let anyone see that. I spent a lot of time off the ground, and at training I'd be behind the sheds throwing up, and it was just it was hard work. But I love cricket too much to not do it. But it certainly didn't help my cricket at all. That's for sure.
Do you think the social side of it was important leading up to your transplant and having that time with your mates from cricket?
Yeah, absolutely. And that is probably the main reason that I have continued with cricket for as long as I have. Whilst I was never a great cricketer, I was good enough to play with my mates for as long as I possibly could. So yeah, that's always been my main motivation, is to play with my mates and share some success along the way.
And after your transplant, how long did it take you to get back up to fitness and return to playing again?
I played. So my transplant was in April, and we sort of started our season October, November. I came back and I did pre-season, but I found I was absolutely petrified. I just didn't want to get hit. I was just
I can understand.
mentally wasn't ready for it, so I sort of walked away for a bit, and watched. But the bug got me. That sort of like, well, at the end of the day, God gave me a bat, so don't let yourself get hit. And to this day, I haven't been hit anywhere around near where my new kidney is. So grateful for that. But yeah, the bug. I mean, reality is I should have worn a pad, and I didn't. Never have. Reality is I've been lucky to get to the point where I have to not being hit around it. But I'm a little bit jittery. If I've got somebody who's a little bit quick and who might be able to hurt me, I'm sort of make sure there's one piece of my body I get out of the way pretty quickly, which has probably been detrimental for my game. But I don't play Test cricket. I play lower grade country cricket, so it's not life and death.
So you mentioned protection there, and that you don't wear a pad. Regular listeners will know that a question I ask a lot and we talk about a lot on here is protection for sport, and particularly with cricket because of the speed that the ball can come and how hard it is and how focused the impact would be if you did get hit. And I wear a chest guard myself. We've had people wearing different things, boxing guards. I think Lee said in, I think, the 5th episode I did, he used to wear something, doesn't anymore. And he now turns his back if he feels like he's going to get hit and just takes it on his back rather than the kidney. Have you got an evasive strategy or a move that you do to get out of the way of the ball?
Basically, run as quickly as I can to square leg. I'm being facetious here. No, the same thing. If you get yourself into a position, I've always been a fairly decent back foot player. But if I get myself in a position where I'm struggling, I will just turn my back into it. I'd rather wear it on the back. I do everything, sort of do everything I can to try and protect it. Subconsciously, you're always thinking about it. But I guess if you're batting well enough, as I said earlier, God gave you a bat, hit the bloody thing. So, yeah.
Speaking of protection and cricket gear, if anyone would like any high quality premium cricket gear, you can go to neoncricket.co.uk, have a look around on there. They've got bats, pads, gloves, the whole works, whole range. If it's just something you like, you can add it into your basket, and then when you get to the checkout, you can use the code LewisD25, and that will get you 25% off everything on the website. So if you do want any cricket equipment for the new season, which hopefully we're going to get to play, it's LewisD25 at neoncricket.co.uk for 25% off. Since your transplant, you became part of the Lucky Stars Australia transplant cricket team. When was it that you found out about that?
It was funny. After my transplant, obviously you're high as a kite on drugs for a few days, and it was about 3 days after my transplant, a gentleman walked into my room and started talking as if I'd known him for 15 years, and he started talking about he'd actually just come from the football and talked to me about my family and how we're going to play cricket moving forward. And I sort of said to him, I had to stop him after about 10 minutes. I said, I hate to be rude, but mate, who the hell are you? And it ends up it was Kevin Green, who's certainly a very big personality over here within the transplant community. And I mentioned my friend Cassandra earlier, so she'd organised for him to come in and see me. He was the state captain of the Lucky Stars organ transplant recipient team, and he signed me up there and then and said, right, you have to get fit for November. I think we had our first game back in November, and no ifs or buts, he expected to see me up there, and that was the beginning of my journey. It was it was quite weird, but looking back on it now, knowing Greeny a hell of a lot better than I did back in those days, that's Greeny all over it. He just sort of came in and barged his way into my life and didn't give me a choice, and onwards and upwards we went.
So how long have you been playing for them?
So since 2015, so six years now. So we play anywhere from say four to 7 games across the country over any given calendar year, or over any given Australian summer, which is over 2 calendar years. We play all around the country, and I've had the joy of actually coming to England and playing on an Ashes tour, and we played in Queensland and New South Wales and South Australia, and some beautiful cricket grounds and some beautiful places, and all the time trying to promote our message about organ donation and trying to live your life, trying to live the best life we can as we sort of move through it.
I think again, it's what I've found since joining the England team is that you're meeting people who have been through the same experiences as you. They understand what everyone's going through, and you're all coming together to play the sport you love, and ultimately, the main goal: raise awareness for organ donation.
That's exactly right, and it is, as you said, we are, whether it be we've got guys who have had cornea transplants, liver transplants, all kinds of transplants, and you just know what each other's been through, and there's an unwritten respect for each other, even as much as it pains me, unwritten respect for when we were playing against the Poms for the exact same reason. We've all been in that path. We've all looked at our demons in the face, and we've all come out the other side, and we just know it's a game of cricket, and we're just absolutely blessed, each and every one of us, to have that opportunity.
You mentioned there about playing against England and Wales. How did it feel to play in what was an Ashes series?
Surreal. The only word I can use is surreal. I remember we and you'll have to forgive me. I'm terrible with names as to the places where we were in England, but I remember we were 2 days off the plane and we turned up for our first game of cricket, and I just had to stop and pinch myself, and I took my hat off, and I'm wearing a baggy green hat with Australia on it, and it's like I can't believe what I'm doing, where I was 2 years ago to what I'm doing now. It was just surreal is the only word I can use. It's just amazing to get that opportunity, and I, I won't lie to you, mate. I've bagged, I've bragged the hell out of it to everyone I know. I've got a baggy green, have you? And so no one I know has got a baggy green. So it was immensely proud, and had an absolute ball. Got to play against one of my very, very close mates, and met some wonderful, wonderful human beings. And I've also met people like Dave Parker, who you couldn't put in that kind of category. So, cheerio, Dave.
Dave will be on soon.
Of course he will. Of course he will.
How does it compare playing against England to making your debut in just the first game you played for the Australian team?
Look,
Put you on the baggy
you
green
can't.
for the first time.
Yeah. So you mentioned earlier that I do have a long-standing relationship with Scott Fairbrass, and we'd been talking about this. It was amazing that we've both been through a very similar journey in such a close time frame, and we'd been as much as we can from different sides of the planet, just from 6 months out, just been giving it to each other over social media to the point where a few times people had to interject, thinking that it was serious. There was a large problem, and Scott came out to bat in the first Test matches, opening the batting, and I was opening the bowling, and I bowled the first ball at him and sort of ran one past his outside edge and proceeded to head down the pitch Mitchell Johnson style and just give it to him both barrels, with the kind of language you wouldn't use on your worst enemy, and he was giving it back as well. And the poor bloody umpire who thought he was coming for a lovely charitable social day, he sort of had to got in between us, and he's like, "What's going on here?" And this isn't how cricket's played. And we sort of had to. Both Scott and I were just going at each other quite verbally the whole time. We had to reassure the umpire that no, it's like for me and for him, I consider Scott to be like a brother to me. So to have the joy and to know what the journey we'd both been on, for us to both be able to do that was probably my favourite cricketing memory. But we sort of had to explain ourselves that we didn't pull any punches with each other along the way, and the gentrified English county scene probably wasn't ready for my rude, crude Australianness.
Well, I mean, every week I ask for some list of questions from people on social media. So if you'd like to get any questions in, you can follow Transplant's Take on Sport on Instagram and Facebook at Transplant's Take on Sport Pod, and Twitter at TTOS Pod. So I put a post out yesterday asking for questions for you. And I suppose in a bit of a special feature this week, we're going to do some quick fire listener questions. So short answers if possible.
Of course.
And this time, all the questions have come from our mutual friend, Scott.
But of course I have.
Are you ready?
Please.
Question 1. How did it feel watching Scott dominate both games in the Ashes?
Don't remember it.
Question 2. How did it feel to give him so much stick and he still scored back-to-back centuries?
Not sure that he did.
Question 3. Out of 10, how beautiful was Scott's 6 straight over your head, over the road, and trees off your bowling?
It was about a 12. It was some bloody good hit.
He'll take that.
You'll need to edit that out, though, please.
Question 4. How did it feel when we rocked up to, I hope I'm pronouncing this right, Muraduk?
Yes, Murdoch, very good. Yes.
In 40-degree heat, having rolled in at 5 a.m. from Voodoo and the skipper elected to field.
So Scott played some cricket out here with me at our local club, and he actually ended up coming to live with me, and I was a young single man at the time, and Friday night was Friday night, and as he said, we went out to a club called Voodoo, and doors shut at about 2 o'clock, and Scotty and I lived in a house alone. It was like, well, we might as well bring the club home. So it was, by the time we kicked everyone out, it was about 6:15. We headed down to Muruduk, which is a picturesque, pretty little ground. First delivery of the day. Scotty bowled one. Scott had some, back in those days, had some wheels on him. Bloke had a cut shot top edge down to third man. One of our fine cricketers wasn't switched on for the first pill, hit him in the nose and dropped him. And then about 15 overs later, they were none for 200. Scott got hit for about 180 of them, including one that only landed just about last week. He got hit that far. It was the biggest hit known to man ever. And I still take great joy in reminding him every single time I drive past Muruduk. I'll stop and take a little photo and flick it through him and go, home sweet home, buddy. So.
Question 5, love you really?
Yeah, no, look, as much as people who know both Scott and I will know that we go back and forth over social media, I'm immensely proud of Scott and who he's the bloke he's turned into. I'd consider him like a brother, and but he's probably one of those brothers who you don't invite to Christmas and you don't like to talk about.
It's a great story, the fact that you both played with each other in Australia when he was over there, and then you've both had kidney transplants. You're both playing for your respective national transplant teams, and you both played against each other. It's a really nice story that brings it all together.
Yeah, it really is. It's surreal how it happened. The fact that Scott actually introduced me to social media. I was never in any social media at all. I actually joined the day after I got my transplant. I joined social media at his bequest. And yeah, it was since then we've been going at it absolutely hammer and tongue, and I would be in touch with Scott, sort of pre-transplant, maybe once or twice a year. But now I would speak to Scott, whether it be over Messenger or Skype, calling him 3 or 4 or 5 times a week. He's just an annoying little brat who won't leave me alone. It's almost to the point of being stalked by him. I don't like him, and I feel sorry for his family. Louise, if you're listening, you can do better.
We talked about this earlier, the social side of cricket before your transplant. How important has the social side been, especially with the transplant cricket team, because you all know what each other's been through?
Yeah, it's there is a bond. There's an unspoken bond, and just some wonderful people and bad people. I'm trying to think of the best way to put this, Lewis. People who enjoy life and want to go out and live it and are appreciative for everything they've got get involved in actions like this.
Yeah.
There's no people who look down on life who get involved in this. So it's always, whether it be a transplant recipient or any one of our ambassadors through the club, it's just an absolute joy and a pleasure, because everyone's coming to do the right thing and spread our message and celebrate the fact that we're alive and we get this opportunity. It's fantastic.
Like a family feel.
It is, absolutely. It is, absolutely. It is, and we're in a very big country, mate, and we've got people who have made lifelong friendships with all over our country. Who I can ring up anyone today and say, look, I'm coming up. I can go up to Queensland and I have a myriad of places to stay at, no questions asked. Same things. They would come down to where I'm in Melbourne. They come down and no questions asked and put them up. It is a family. It's we're truly blessed to have each other in each other's lives.
A couple more things before we go. It's been a pleasure to speak to you today and get your story and talk cricket with you. I mean, you've slightly mentioned this earlier. What are your greatest moments with the Lucky Stars Australian transplant cricket team?
Hands down, without a shadow of a doubt, is the England tour. Was just amazing. Met some amazing human beings. Had the joy of meeting some amazing human beings who were even English, which you'll find hard to believe. But it's been to have that ability to get us treated as well as we did, and the camaraderie out there, and it was. I grew up, and to me, the mecca is playing cricket in England. I was never talented enough to get that opportunity as if I can use the phrase, able-bodied cricketer. So to get the opportunity as a broken down old hack was a lifelong dream come true. And we all had bad days, and I think back to those days and how much fun I had, and just the wonderful people I met, and that's hands down the most fun I've ever had in sport. Even though we got absolutely walloped, it was still one of the greatest things. It was one of the things of bucket list type thing, mate. I'll treasure that memory forever.
I mean, hopefully there's another one coming up soon.
Well, look, we're all fingers crossed that we can all get through the other side of this this COVID world, and then hopefully once we all take our bloody injections and get the other side of it, we can start looking at trying to put something together. That would be
absolutely.
That would certainly be worth going for.
Ashley, it's been a pleasure to talk to you today. One more question before we go, which I ask everyone who's been on. What's one piece of advice you'd give to someone facing a transplant?
Buckle up. It is hard. It is hard work. Don't let anyone tell you it's not hard work. But goodness me, it's so worth it. You get to the other side, and everyone who's been through it says the same thing. It changes who you are as a human. It really focuses what in your life is a priority and what you can just let go. And the lease on life it gives you, it's worth a fight. It's worth a fight.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. Once you get through it, there's a newfound appreciation and gratefulness for life and just being here to see everything happening.
True, very true.
Ashley, thank you so much for coming on. Listeners, if you're enjoying the podcast, please make sure you subscribe or follow wherever you normally listen. That way, all new episodes go straight into your library on whichever app you use, and you won't miss any. If you listen on Apple Podcasts, that is, as I've said most weeks now, that is the most used app to listen to it on. There's a feature on there where you can rate it and review the podcast. If you give it 5 stars on there, that would mean a massive amount to me. And if you leave a review along with your 5-star rating, I'll read them out at the end of the podcast. If you'd like to follow on social media, we've mentioned them before. Instagram and Facebook at Transplant's Take on Sport Pod, and Twitter at TTOS Pod. Thank you very much for listening, as always. Thank you to my guest today, once again, Ashley Butcher. I've been Lewis Daniels, and you've been listening to Transplant's Take on Sport.